His voice has carried us through some of history's biggest moments.
From MSNBC, Decision 2020, Election Night. Live from Democracy Plaza.
Well, good evening once again. Brian Williams here with you at NBC News Global Headquarters in New York, and we are underway.
Reporting from around the world, interviewing some of the most influential figures of our time, and more recently, navigating an unprecedented moment in American politics.
Well, good evening once again. Day 1449 of the Trump administration, leaving 13 days until the inauguration of Joe Biden as the 46th president. And what a uniquely dark time in our modern history.
I'm Nicole Wallace. Tonight, I'm delighted to introduce all of you at the University of Illinois to my dear friend, Brian Williams, an event brought to you by the Frank Center for Leadership and Innovation in Media. And your moderator tonight, Frank Center Director, Clinical Assistant Professor of Journalism, and former executive producer of the 11th Hour with Brian Williams, Colleen King.
Wow.
Welcome.
I didn't know
Brian
that
Williams.
was so
You didn't
weird
know that was happening.
to see that TV guy. That was weird,
Yeah.
but lovely and flattering, and thank you.
Have you ever been here before?
Illinois a ton of times, but not this campus and not this town, and I'm thrilled to be here. I overnighted in Indianapolis, so I drove across on I-74, and for me, out east, I come for the Arby's, so it is an Arby's corridor. I'll be honest, I have the app, and there's like one in Jersey and one weird one in Connecticut, and I don't think there's one left in Manhattan. I'll eat regular food too, but I think I'm going back with an extra large roast beef in my bag.
What are you doing these days?
Well, our daughter made us grandparents 2 years ago, and what I couldn't say in my goodbye at the end of the last broadcast I did on cable was that, I'm in my basement, I'm wearing Uggs, and upstairs was our entire family and my brand new grandson, Arlo. So I've always, off and on, always been a volunteer firefighter, so I'm doing that actively, and Arlo's a half mile away from our house. So grandfathering is spectacular. I told a friend of mine, his kids are of age, and I said, this is going to happen. And whatever you've heard about being a grandparent, double it. It's just fantastic. So that's what I'm doing.
There's been a lot of news going on lately.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Is retirement hard when there's so much going on and there's so much to cover?
This is the first time in 2 years on the bench that I've wanted to be somewhere, and I'd love to be in Tel Aviv right now, and that's a tough one.
Well, in a past life, you would have been there.
Yeah.
What were those trips like when you would kind of get up in the middle of the night sometimes and get on a plane?
I was thinking today, our pilot told us flying into Haiti after the awful earthquake, we were the first plane to land, and I remember Subrata Day, and Meghan Marcus was on the plane. We took a low pass to check the landing strip for cracks because the earth had opened up. And I've said this publicly, I own it, that's the night I slept with Al Roker. Now let me explain. We loaded up a charter aircraft with our friends from the Today Show. We did nightly news out of there. We slept on the tarmac of the airport as the relief, you could see the relief operation coming to life. So Air Force C-17s were arriving all night long. There was nowhere safe to sleep except on a flat paved surface. And Al and I had a tiny, not even a tent, a lean-to we made with blue plastic sheeting and equipment boxes. We thought the hyper-masculine thing to do was to sleep on opposite, so head to toe and head to, we quickly realized we'd had the same boots on for a long time. So my last image, as I went nighty-night, was Al's face doing the same. We remain good friends. To your question. It was from the San Francisco earthquake in the 80s to everything that the stories that broke during our lifetime. The downside was, for all the benefits this career brought my life and family that I never dreamed of as a kid in New Jersey, the downside is you were subject to a phone call, no matter where you were, no matter what was going on. And we burned many a family vacation that way. But there is a certain endorphin also found in the fire service. It's the metaphor is boots by the bed. There's an endorphin that is triggered by that phone call, and you switch into another mode, and you're going someplace to cover something very important for the folks back home.
So if you were in Israel this week, you might be talking to people whose family members had died or are currently hostage, or maybe they were hostages themselves. How do you approach an interview like that?
We had a great time. I see some of the faces of my new friends from the journalism class. I took questions from them. Don't ever. Withering, harrowing. It's horrible. Because the questions are so good and my answers were so inadequate. No two people are alike, and the way you're born is the way you're born, and I was either blessed or cursed with empathy. And it just makes it almost impossible to knock on a door where there's been a loss, and who would want that person on their doorstep? Who would want to be that person? But in a way, reporters I knew who were not blessed or encumbered by empathy had an easier time at it than I did. I hated that part of the job.
Tell us how you got your start in news. How did you begin?
I didn't go to college. I wrote for my high school paper. I wrote an article for the Asbury Park Press as a kid, and I wrote an article for the Red Bank Register as a kid and was paid appropriate sums of money at or about the $10 level. And so I grew up in a news household. We really didn't eat dinner, period, until Walter Cronkite finished his broadcast with "That's the way it is." I'm looking at everyone with hair color similar to mine, nodding. And I mean no disrespect, but that's how we grew up. And so I was that kid who ran to get my parents the night RFK was shot and MLK. And that was my life. I wanted to know things first. I did well at a current events class the next day. And it was a circuitous route. I had this Irish Catholic mother, B. Arthur. Anyone remember the show? Norman Lear show. That was my mother, in effect. If Norman Lear hadn't come up with the character, I lived with one. She was the bride at every wedding and the corpse at every funeral, and she was an amateur actress and singer. DNA qualities that flowed through my wife and me into our daughter, who inherited all of that. And she always said to me, in our house, TV was on from the Today Show till the Tonight Show. It was just, I have found in life, as I said to the students today, it's socioeconomic. In homes of the, you'll forgive the phrase, overeducated and overcompensated, the TV never gets turned on. In the class I grew up in, it's on all day. And she would say to me, you could do better than some of these kids they're hiring on local news. And again, as I said to the students today, I would look at her and say, what part of loser don't you understand? Have a look at me. I'm in a volunteer fire jacket. I have a massive key ring on my waist. I'm working at Sears and Perkins Pancake House. Usually not the first step toward vaulting into a career in television, but God love her, I think it just echoed and banged around, given the ample space and in my brain not taken up by working parts. And when I had a chance, I I went to dinner with a man I knew owned a television station in Pittsburgh, Kansas. The Pittsburgh without the H at the end, we used to call it. And long story short, for $173 a week, I moved out there with my dog and my cardboard boxes and my Dodge Dart, which died in a cornfield in Pittsburgh, Kansas. But that's where I started. And
What kind of stories were you doing?
anything they had. My first story was on an environmental crisis that ended up closing the town of Pitcher, Oklahoma, home of Mickey Mantle. It was lead. It was the lead mines in that part of Kansas and Oklahoma. And the effluent, the rock they would dig up and separate from the lead, was called in the Oklahoma vernacular chat. And these were called chat piles. And some of them look like mountains. Some of them are actually the first to get snow in the winter. And all of that effluent leaked into the town water. And it was just an environmental disaster. The town of Pitcher, Oklahoma doesn't exist today. And I was doing a story on the lead content, the fact that these mines hadn't been capped. Children were falling down these open holes. There's a massive, massive sinkhole in the middle of what was Pitcher, Oklahoma. You never forget your first story on television. I never want to see it again. I was a squinty rookie mess, but somehow I was allowed to come into work the next day.
Were you doing weather there too?
I was doing weather. I did weekend weather. Basic operation, we had magnets for Mr. Sun. Honest to God.
How good are you at forecasting weather?
Well, in the heart of America's breadbasket, they send you to a weekend at the National Severe Storms Forecast Center in Kansas City, Missouri, for people who are going to be doing weather on television and are decidedly not meteorologists, or in my case, learned. So you would get off the wire, literally paper off the AP wire, you would get the zone forecast for Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, and thus our call letters, KOAM, and you would put together an amalgam forecast. Get that wrong, however. If you predict thunderstorms on a late summer night, and a family farmer has to hire freelance combines to bring in that crop, with their savings, you're rightfully going to hear about it the next day. So that is your first reminder that this is very serious business. Say nothing of the various take cover warnings that would happen during tornadic activity. I learned a lot, didn't eat much, I couldn't afford much. I lived in an efficiency apartment in Joplin, Missouri, and after the Joplin tornado, after that charter flight out, after that I went right to Joplin, Missouri, and I went to my old garden apartment to see if the complex was still standing, and it was. They lost the hospital, they lost the high school, but my crappy old apartment complex still stood.
So in those early jobs, what were some of the skills you were learning for our journalism students here to think about?
Well, as I said, I think like every rookie, I started out thinking there was a way to be on television. You had to affect a TV voice because everyone growing up kind of had a TV voice, and that don't fly. That doesn't. You've got to. The best boss I ever had.
Me?
Early in my career, the first in a string of women executive producers and news directors. Only had like 2 dude bosses. They've all been women. My first news director, my second news director, and my third. My second in Washington, D.C., Betty Endicott used to say, talk to the camera lens, and remember, it's a glass lens, often with a teleprompter scrolling on it. This makes me petrified. Talking to live people is not, I look like I'm missing a hit of meth. This is not my natural state. A lot of us are introverts. A lot of the actors you meet, a lot of the comedians, a lot of the anchors, reporters are introverts because We're not forced to be extroverted. It's part of why I had a hard time approaching people at tough times in their lives for interviews. All you do at the end of your day is talk to a piece of glass, often with a guy named Vinny behind the camera who you've come to know and you're BSing with during commercial breaks. So that's hard to calibrate. I found that if the camera was too far from me, I projected too much. And I was screaming at people at home who had done nothing wrong. I was yelling at them. But bring it in, and in the last 2 years of my career, in my basement during COVID, I was the technical director. They were not the boss of me. This was my basement, not theirs. So I brought the camera in and put the desk up, so it was quite intimate. And I kind of, in the last 2 years of my career, calmed my delivery down more than I ever was able to do. But Betty said, picture the people you have loved the most, alive or dead. It can be a dear departed grandparent, a friend of yours, a contemporary, your neighbors, the people you go on vacation with. Just talk to a room of them. Just tell them what happened today. Best piece of advice I ever had.
How about some writing advice? You're a brilliant writer when it comes to TV news scripts. You've got a few words that you absolutely cannot stand.
Oh my God.
When was the last time you touted something?
When was the last stopgap measure you went after? There's this lingo that we all know, and it's ridiculous. It's malarkey. It's not English. I always say to students, the word stated is in every Wikipedia profile in the world because it's a cheap word for bad writers. It's okay to say he or she said, and say it 1,000,000 times in the piece. That's how we talk. No one stated. Stated is a cheap excuse for a word. Join me in banishing it. Also, such as. No one says such as. We'll say there were various problems with the early models of the DeLorean, like the gull wing doors didn't work and the damn thing rusted. I wouldn't say such as ill-fitting gull wing door. Who the hell talks that way? Not in my house, not in yours preferably. Speak English. The people who have taken a moment of their busy lives to listen or watch you deserve nothing less. We're in a hurry these days. Don't waste my time with stated and such as, with words such as stated.
I didn't write that.
A word about this relationship, if you will. I have been blessed with great directors and great executive producers and news directors. And the relationship to me isn't worth a thing if you don't become pals along the way. I can't remember a disagreement. Do we ever have a disagreement?
Not that you know about.
And the relationship between anchor and executive producer is, I don't know what to compare it to. It can be fraught because hopefully you were both hired because you've been on the job for a while, you're good at what you do. Our jobs are inherently different. I couldn't do Colleen's job with a gun to my head. I admire it, and I admire people who do it well. What I can't overstate is the quality this institution, and this is all, remember, thanks to the largesse and the gift of two people in this front row, the quality you're getting. There is no more direct line from the world of television news in New York, Washington, LA, where all the networks are, to this town in Illinois, to this campus, this institution, than Colleen.
Back to you. I was looking up people you've interviewed over the years. We saw some of them up there. You've ridden in The Beast with Obama. You've interviewed 6 presidents. You talked to Steve Jobs, Ahmadinejad, Sarah Palin, all kinds of people.
In no particular order.
Yeah. Which ones stand out now, having some time removed from doing it every day?
Wow. As a little kid reading books, and reading every Life and Look magazine I could get my hands on. My father was kind of a standard, he was a captain in World War II. He was a kind of a rock-ribbed, what we used to call moderate Republicans. Goldwater was too much for him. Nixon broke his heart, and so he became kind of Democrat curious. And so Time magazine was always on our coffee table. Well, my parents believed in keeping up on stuff. To get to be in the presence of a president, let alone half dozen of them, to get to form words and talk to them, you know, it was beyond my wildest dreams. So I visited Jerry and Betty Ford in Palm Springs in their later years. And they were just the cutest old couple. I felt like saying, "Get over here, you." And, you know, Jerry would, we walk in, excuse me, and he says, "Well, here's where we watch you." And there's 2 TV trays in front of the TV, and my hand to God, that's where we sat and had iced tea, because they were in their Brian Williams watching seats. And I was doing a live show in the living room, and I'm sitting there with Gerald Ford, who may have saved our republic, and but not for a half-inch strip of steel on the edge of his vessel in the Navy in the South Pacific, would have gone in the drink, never heard from again, wouldn't have been a great congressman from Michigan, wouldn't have risen in the House of Representatives, wouldn't have been named Nixon's vice president, wouldn't have been president. I got to know Carter, ditto. Couple of Bushes, covered Bill Clinton, flew millions of miles around the world on that airplane, that beautiful airplane, that symbol of our country. Amazing. First time I saw Mount Rushmore was because the pilot of Air Force One dipped a wing and we did a low circle over it. Tell me how that gets better. And it saved me a trip to South Dakota, which a long way in from New Jersey, and gas prices being what they are. I saw the pyramids from the window of Air Force One. Pyramids. The ones in Egypt, not in Vegas. And this is how I received the world. It's like I watched somebody else's movie. I was working at Sears a minute ago. Employee number 14928. I could still log in on that register.
What were some of the hardest interviews?
The hardest, I think the hardest thing, because of what we saw and what we witnessed, I mean, the stories like the Banda Aceh earthquake and tsunami, where they measured the dead in tens of thousands.
Did you go over for that?
Yeah.
One?
It's if you're born with any feeling at all, it's traumatic stuff to be around. Hurricane Katrina was just the worst. I can't talk about it.
It's hard. How would you prepare for interviews? Do you have a method that you like, or an approach you could recommend to try for the students?
I got this question today, and I think my answer was, there's going to be, and I'm looking over at the student section roughly, there's going to be questions you're expected to ask. But then, you know, if you've chosen this business, that means something about your judgment, about your wiring. Ask what you want to know. There's a very good chance you're going to have an affinity group among people who are watching. I am an old dude. I'm a 64-year-old white guy. So I'm going to use phrases like the folks watching at home, on the television set, through the cable box that everyone has. And I know I'm a moron, and you're probably going to watch 11 seconds on your phone, and I get that. I do the same thing. I'm a multiple screen television viewer.
What are you watching these days? What are your favorite news shows?
Oh, that's a tough question. I have always, and this does not get into issues of politics or competition or anything like that. Because they are different products, I have watched CNN as a news gathering entity for much of my life and professional life. It has a reach overseas if you are traveling that domestic networks don't have. I, because I'm a news nerd, have been watching, and because of my interest in the region and the country, I've been watching something called I-24. Anyone? No? It is a cable channel owned by a guy who owns France 24 and the Spectrum Cable Company, and it is local news in Israel delivered in English for export for an international audience. Because again, you can't be in these network jobs and not know Israel and Jordan and Gaza and Lebanon, so that invests you. I'm invested in parts of the world I never dreamed I'd see in anything other than a magazine on the coffee table. So the fact that I'm curious as to the number of missiles that have landed in Ashkelon, because I've been to Ashkelon in so many of these previous conflicts, I know it always has a target over it, and they have incorporated that into their daily lives. So I've been, this is a story I would be covering, I've been watching that. But I look for, I use social media for aggregators. I have the journalists I follow at the Times and the Washington Post, the networks I follow, the individuals I follow who are thoughtful amid the ongoing dumpster fire of the former Twitter and now X. And it's a nasty, rancid. Was that a fist in the air in support of my remarks? Or? Okay. I'm glad we're on the right side of this one. But it's really, it's bad. I just use it for the people I follow. The stuff they send me that's unsolicited is horrible. And when we were doing our broadcast, I would often say that I have 1 or 2 follows in my phone that I know to be straight up Russian propaganda and Russian financed. And I watch them scientifically. I watch them with interest because they send me stories to make me feel bad about our country. It doesn't work because I'm onto their little game, but it's remarkable what has happened to us based on a minimal investment from overseas. Think of it. We're basically a trusting country, and based on no money up front. I believe history will prove that Brexit was the first ever probe into that Brexit cost them about $7 online. I happened to be in the UK the morning after the election, and the Brits I knew and met and talked to woke up like, we did what now? They were not prepared for the consequences. As I think I've made clear, I think Boris Johnson has some questions to answer over the coming years about that. But these are crazy times, and crazier because I believe in my core we are a good and trusting country. So when we're not used to seeing something, when it comes in over the electronic transom, I think it came gently to us. And now I think for the discerning customer of social media, it's right there. You know it when you see it.
When you came to MSNBC, it was 2015?
Mm-hmm.
What were your expectations? What were you thinking about? You came back in a breaking news role.
Well, Jon Stewart had just retired, and it's only germane because...
Brian loves the word germane.
Yes, Colleen loves to make fun of Brian. So, if there are words that I happen to favor...
Rigor?
Rigor is a great word. Germane is germane to this damn conversation.
Okay.
You just can't make up this spark, this magic. What was I saying?
You're talking about coming back to MSNBC.
And why Jon Stewart's retirement was germane. He left vacant the 11 o'clock time zone on the East Coast, which has traditionally been the stuff of local news. A lot of the stations so aggressively trying to thwart new customers by allowing local news to become so bad, except in those cases where stations are making I will always be a local news hound. First thing I did when I arrived last night, I just cruise around the late local news. As long as I can draw a breath, that's what I'll do. Worked 12 years in local news, still believe in it. But that time slot, I just thought, end of the day, we named this cable broadcast at MSNBC the 11th hour, which of course made no sense at all. It's the 23rd hour, but we don't like math, and we were reminded of that on occasion, but we would just brush it off. And my boss at the time said to not devote a show to this campaign and this coming election would be malpractice. And so I was given the opportunity to choose the name, and because of my advanced learning, 23 hours, 11, I don't know. It sounded great to call it the 11th because it's the 11th hour in the campaign. And I chose the time slot. And it just kind of developed organically. We started at 30 minutes.
Yes, it was supposed to be a temporary show that it was a pop-up that would self-cancel. What did you
Thank you, yes. I wasn't sure I wanted to do it for a whole long time, so I said on the inaugural night it was a pop-up broadcast that was self-canceling.
Just to get that on the record.
Yeah. 5 years later.
Yeah.
But we had fun. There's nothing like a newsroom and last hour before airtime.
Yeah.
Even though, I'll say this gently, you and I you're not old enough to remember typewriters in newsrooms.
No.
How about cigarettes in newsrooms?
No.
I had a producer in local news in New York who would have one going and light up a backup. Jimmy Murphy was his name, still alive. He had one going, and it was like Hildy Johnson on the front page. And he's typing, and you had to type with the force of 1,000 men because it was 5-ply. You enjoying these stories from old-timey days? 5-ply paper. So for television, you would take this 5-ply paper, and it had material on it, which I'm certain will give us all stage 4 hand cancer. And you would separate these sheets, and prompter would get a copy, and the anchor would get a copy, and the technical director, and the director, and the Chiron operator. Oh man, it was fantastic. It was paper heavy. It was a lot of paper. And a lot of cigarettes.
So in 2016, we used computers and printed out scripts on
Yes, and we were quiet and sedate and polite.
What do you think made that show the success that it was?
Oh, I just think it was timing. I think, part of, I'm speaking to the folks with hair my color just for another second. The change in our lifetime is cable networks that agree with you first thing in the morning. They agree with whatever viewpoint you have. You can select a network based on that. And a lot of folks say, well, that's kind of malarkey because back in the Cronkite days, it might have seemed down the middle, but there were, you're doing a lot of nodding, so thank you for giving me someone to, you weren't as aware of the liberal, casual, coastal, East Coast, white male bias that was loaded into each broadcast. It really was the statement of the establishment every night. But I don't think we're better off with these silos of networks that agree with us. So knowing that, let's not beat around the bush. MSNBC is hardly Fox News. It is known as the ideological antithesis on the cable box to Fox News. CNN has had a leftward kind of establishment view for a long time. They've become curious on the other side, and they're finding their way right now. But we just wanted to give an assessment at the end of the day of that day in the campaign and then what became that day in the presidency.
Can you talk about how print reporters kind of became stars in 2016, 2017 as the election was unfolding and everything after Trump's inauguration?
Well, you were part of this. Our only goal, we wanted our guests to be journalists, and they were the star of the show. And for us television journalists, it was thrilling to know that Peter Baker of the New York Times, or Phil Rucker of the Washington Post, or Ashley Parker of the Post had just hit send on an article that people would be seeing on phones, laptops, and there's apparently a paper edition of the website of these. And she would come on and talk about it with us. Yeah. Ashley Parker, who I still think has the ability to come as close to a modern Dorothy Parker as we've ever had. She has such an ability to turn a phrase and a great eye. And in the course of knowing her and having her on our show, she is married and is the mother of two. And it's like watching your kids grow up. But we loved our frequent guests. And I don't know, we just got into a groove. Mm-hmm. You and I had the same taste in who the best folks were.
Yeah, and it was really about the reporting. It wasn't about commentary per se. Yeah.
Right.
What do you think about the future of news? I mean, you used to have audiences that were in excess of 10 million people a night, and those numbers aren't like that anymore. What do you think
Right. This
happening?
is now the most people I've seen in years. We're fragmented, and I don't know how to process it. I'm not a Michael Beschloss or a John Meacham, two of our other favorite guests. I leave it to my smart friends to tell me what has happened, good or bad. When Cronkite did his broadcast, it was the equivalent of addressing the nation on a nightly basis. Yes, it was the establishment view from on high. It was heavy into Washington hearings. So you got older white males covering hearings run by older white males, all of them sharing a basic worldview. But man, what an audience. What a swath of America. The people who watched those first space missions, both up in space, around the globe, first orbit, and then the first landing on the moon. This was the global community that Marshall McLuhan talked about. So now there's no two of us in this room who have the same Spotify list, who will watch the same thing after this event is over until we fall asleep tonight or during the day tomorrow at the same time. In my childhood, I spent a few years in Elmira, New York before moving to the Jersey Shore. Our houses, because of socioeconomics, were so close that I could tell Mrs. Miller next door liked Johnny Carson because the shot change and that blue burst of light against the shade was the same in her house as it was in our house. I can now afford to live slightly farther apart from our neighbors, one of the great wonders of my life still. But that moment is gone. And now, the highest rated broadcast of any kind, because there's no advantage on streaming to a live event. I'm a NFL guy, and I love Sunday Night Football. I love the production of it, the feel of it, and it allows me yet another night of the week to flush down the toilet watching grown men fight each other. But that, live events, is the last thing people are watching communally on television. You get, 26 million around there watching Sunday Night Football. Congrats on your Bears, by the way. I have this great affinity. Undrafted, Division II kid, just awesome. I would trade you. I'm a Giants fan. Again, send your condolence cards to New York. But I would trade quarterbacks in a heartbeat. Give you Daniel Jones, and we'll take this kid. And Mahomes, don't get me started, has redesigned the game of football. Every kid will want to play quarterback like Patrick Mahomes. And it couldn't be a nicer guy ushering in the new era of the NFL. Don't ask me about Taylor Swift.
Did you ever do sports coverage?
No, I mean I'm a huge sports fan. I'm a gearhead. I'm a stock car. I go to my local third of a mile oval every weekend that my dad took me to at age 9. Any stock car fans here? Okay.
No.
Okay.
Yep, couple.
So I love sports. I watch sports. It's a fun time of year, given the baseball playoffs especially, but no.
What could people in news learn from sports coverage?
Oh, a lot. Al Michaels, the night of the OJ slow speed chase, in an instant turned from sports to news. And that story, I should tell you I have, can I say that I have a podcast?
You may.
My theory is that I said to the students today, in 2 weeks, all Americans will have a podcast.
Yeah.
And we will then come to an era where we can't listen to anyone else's. I have one that is on the serious side called We Interrupt This Broadcast. And it's the audio of all the special reports, all the bulletins of all the stories of our lifetime covered by electronic media. So Challenger, Gulf War, JFK assassination, you name it, the attempt on Reagan.
OJ.
I'm sorry?
OJ.
OJ, there it is. And this was a story that to the, again, mostly white, often Ivy League educated, well-off news division presidents in New York was a little puffy. A white Bronco, might be OJ in the back seat. There's this guy driving, and of course, it being LA, there's 9 helicopters watching this SUV on the 405. It became a story because people could not get enough of that. Just like a little girl named Jessica McClure in Texas fell down a well. Americans were onto it. Front page of People magazine, a vigil on television. There are stories that people insist are stories that often have dragged news executives, into covering the story, and OJ sure was one. Al Michaels suddenly in the role of news anchor, just like the slaughter at the Munich Olympics was a sports event until it was a news event. We were all watching that morning, people who were of age. So I think the ability to speak on your feet without a script, to this day, Al Michaels, who now works for Amazon Prime Thursday Night Football, nothing tells you where we are today, media-wise, more than those words, which I never thought I'd say. But he doesn't know what's going to happen in the next play. He doesn't know that Mahomes is going to throw it like around his back to Kelsey, and Kelsey's going to go home to Taylor Swift, and everyone's going to be happy. Who could see that coming?
You were known for your breaking news coverage as well. You did hours and hours of rolling news coverage from shootings to hurricanes to elections and terrorist attacks and all kinds of things.
Way too many shootings.
Yeah. What was that like?
Well, there's no, now water went down the wrong pipe. Everyone's going to think I'm overcome permanently. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Obviously there's no script, but starting the night, the third night of MSNBC, we're in a former Hartz Mountain, my hand to God, birdseed warehouse in Secaucus, New Jersey.
This is what, 1990?
Pan Am 103. And so we're in this birdseed warehouse. And by the way, our mailing address, this brand new network on cable, was 40 Hartz Way, Secaucus, New Jersey. And I said to our boss, who you know, Andy, why don't you go to the city council in Secaucus? Just a thought here. And we've got Rockefeller Plaza across the river. I bet you, since we're the only business on this piece of pavement, they would let you name it MSNBC Plaza. We need new letterhead because it went through. No more birdseed reference on our mailing address. So we're in this studio and the plane went into the drink off Murrow, New York. We had no graphics department. Famously, a kid ran out to his trunk. We're on live television and he got a Rand McNally Road Atlas and it fell to me to put my finger off the coast of Long Island, hold it up as if it was a television graphic, and show people where this plane had gone down and where these souls had died. And Princess Diana died in the early days of MSNBC, followed by, what was it? Was Mother Teresa the next prominent death after that? You can't, there's no false equivalency or real equivalency there. You just have to, you know, the whole world was sad. The most photographed woman in the world had died. You're sad, your camera operator's sad. You don't have texting yet. We haven't imagined what that must be like. But when you're in the anchor chair during breaking news today, you're hearing from the world, your family, your friends. You're also scrolling. You're using your follows of your interests and things you follow just because of the job you do. And I always insisted there's a moment, a few minutes into every major breaking news story. You never have proof of it, but I can feel people tuning in. And Colleen knows we would kind of take a breath and do what we call resets. You know, at the 3 p.m. hour here in the East, we're covering a tragic news of yet another school shooting in America, this time in fill in the blank. An aircraft has gone down with 300 souls aboard. And there is a, it's not for everybody. There is a way to do it, to try to and especially in my case, I was an aviation kid. I grew up reading about planes. I grew up reading about tanks and ships. And so often the breaking news was in my wheelhouse. It was something I knew about. I knew the JT-8D engine and what aircraft flew with it. And so it just was something I tried to be good at.
How do you pay attention to things when people are talking in your ear?
Oh, it focuses the mind.
You also like to have a lot of monitors that you could see.
I had to see our competition.
Like the control room, yeah.
That's the other thing. I mean,
describe your setup and how it works.
Yeah, and I like to see the camera feeds coming in to the control room so I can save you from yelling in my ear. We wear these earpieces, so actually that's how I met my wife. My wife, 39 years ago, was a producer in Washington, D.C., and I heard her voice before I ever met or saw her. I recommend it. And 37 years of marriage and 2 kids and 1 grandchild later, I'm here to tell you, try meeting somebody that way. It's really great. But anyway, Colleen and I, not married. No. And but Colleen, among her talents, is learning how to talk to someone who is talking. So I'm anchoring. She's got to tell me we have to go to Denver for a press conference. And sometimes she has to tell me the county sheriff's name because I don't want to screw that up. And she's trying to time my inhalations. She's trying to see if I'm going to take a pause. Sometimes Colleen or our mutual friend Patrick, who's also an executive producer, will say, I need you for a second, or take a pause here. And then you'd word spew, and then I'd pick up talking again, and hopefully the audience would not notice that break. It is an art form. It's always something horrendous you're covering, but you have to get this job done. So when done well, it is a kind of behind the scenes. No one will get credit for it ever, and no one should. That's not what we're in this for. It's kind of a concert. It's kind of a ballet, and the end effect is often the best job you can do at the worst story ever.
Do you think you got better at it over time, or do you think you were just kind of born for it?
Oh no, I'm sure I sucked at it when I was young. I hope
so. What kind of tips could you give?
Tips. Read as much about the stuff that is apt to cause breaking news as you can for our young broadcasters or writers here. Writing should be absolutely like breathing. An explosion at the lunch hour, whatever it is, in whatever city, writing should be instinct. You'd be able to, I will often, as if I'm typing, tap out stories while I'm thinking. It has to be like breathing. And if it's not, I'll often say to journalism students, it's not going to work out. if it's killing you, if it's a struggle, this is especially for broadcast students. If it's a breaking news story and it doesn't come to you as to how the pieces go in order, it might be hard for you. The actual delivering it, you're either going to like being on camera or not. You're either going to be good on camera or not. But there's something, it's the only thing in my life I've been able to do without thinking about it. And it is a portable skill. I could, God forbid something happens when I'm driving on I-74 tonight, phone in 2 graphs to the Associated Press. I promise I could write it on an envelope and phone it in, only because that's the only thing I can do. So I don't know if that's advice. I'm sure I got better at it because what gets your attention is the fact that, dear God, millions of people are watching. You owe it to them. These are, the great thing about coming out here is we don't talk about it this way, but you're our customers. There was a great United Airlines commercial about 20, 30 years ago. Small business got some bad news, and the boss hands out plane tickets, and he says, we're going to go see our customers. And you are our customers. Anyone who has taken 2 minutes to tune in, watch what I did, watch what the two of us did together, to care, to choose our brand, to choose our delivery over anyone else, that makes you a customer. That means we should be grateful to you for your time and attention. It means a ton to us. We work so hard at this, and people like us, we're wired so that we're thinking about it when we're not doing it. That's tragic. But anyway, I feel that way.
Okay, last question. This
Oh,
was
boy.
from a student. What do you think it takes to become a journalist? I'm scared that I have what it takes, but I might be too late. I'm 22.
Oh, wow. I'm getting all those Medicare mailings. 22. I was in Kansas, starving. Never too late. Curiosity. First thing I did when I drove into town today, I happened to be an architecture buff. I went to see the Armory. What a stunning piece of architecture. Parked my car, took my iPhone, shot some pictures that I will now always have. But I read up on where I was going, because I'm not wired any other way. Just not going to willy-nilly drive to a town. I now know where the Arby's are on 74. That's research. No, it's curiosity. It's wanting to know. You're on a flight from Chicago to New York. What was that thing? What was that thing? You're flying over Arizona. You see a circle in the ground. Wow, that's the biggest preserved meteor crater in the United States. And there's a whole welcome center. You can buy pieces of it and fantastic books on craters there at the gift shop. I've done it because I'm curious. And curiosity will get you everywhere. It's a great quality to have. I don't think journalists can survive without curiosity. You got to be that person asking that one extra borderline annoying question. Something doesn't look right to you. It's also true in law enforcement. Something doesn't look right to you. You're making your rounds at night. Good cops always drive with the windows down so they can hear anything, especially cops in rural areas. Be curious. There's no other parallels between our jobs but that. And find that there is some ways to work out and practice those skills, get better at writing, get better at the presentation, but you got to be curious. And those assignments that mean professors give you, go out today and come back to this classroom with a feature story. Man, I'd love to be with you guys. I mean, there's a feature story every 6 feet. We're surrounded by them. There's a story in everything. What strikes you differently about this event from other events you've been from? The house lights remained up. Today, during the ribbon cutting, we had the automatic door.
Yes.
Opening and closing. But I came up with a metaphor. One door was open. The other automatic door was opening and closing. So I decided it means that thanks to the generosity of your host tonight, thanks to the skill of the superb woman they have hired to run things here, the door to this institution will always be open. The door opening and closing was to signify the newly educated and ready for the workforce journalists who will leave this institution. With that, can I thank you for having me?
Thank you.